I used to work in a clothing store in the mall. Very often, I was the last person leaving. I would close up the store, make sure everything was clean, and then lock up and leave. The mall was usually very busy. It was a Mills outlet mall, but I don't really want to mention where exactly it was. Eventually, a day came when we were having a bit of a violent winter storm. It wasn't so bad when I'd left for work that day. However, once I got there, the snow was falling in full force. I could barely even see where I was going when I got out of the car and tried to make it into the mall. I had to shield my eyes because the snowflakes were getting into them, and they actually hurt quite a bit. I had no doubt in my mind this day was not going to be very busy at the mall. I was right. The huge mall was totally dead for almost the entire day. A lot of the stores actually made the decision to close up early. I was the only one working my store at the time, so the manager of the store called me up and left it up to me whether or not I wanted to work that day. I decided I really needed the hours, customers or not. I kept the store open a few hours before closing anyway, since nobody was coming in at all. The mall became a bit of a ghost town. So many stores were closed up, their gates pulled down already, and all the lights off as well. Only a few people remained in the entire place. I guess the pretzel store in the food court had remained open because a guy who was working there came into my store. I didn't really get a good feeling from him right away. He didn't really seem to be interested in the clothes. He would shuffle through a few shirts, then keep looking at me. Eventually, he made his way over to the counter and tried to make some small talk with me. I didn't really like talking to him. Something about him felt off and very forced. After a while, he asked me a very weird and cliché question. Hey, you ever see a dead body? That was strange. I told him no, as I'd never been to a funeral before. He nodded and said, "It's really cool. I mean, a dead body looks so different than the person looked when they were alive. It's like when someone dies, something leaves them, something that made them who they are. You should really see one sometime." I don't think I have to explain that this made me very uneasy. It was a sick and weird thing to just say out of nowhere. He kept talking about dead bodies too. The guy spent a good 30 minutes talking about it before he suddenly left to go back to his restaurant. Before I could even sigh in relief, however, he came back and continued to speak to me about dead bodies and decaying things. As before, I couldn't really believe he was just talking only about this. I really wished in that moment that I had agreed to close the store early. When a closing came, the only thing I really had to do was close the gate and make sure all the drawers were locked up and safe. I decided to hurry out the back door to prevent myself from running into that creepy guy again. The snow was still coming down hard at this point. It had piled up quite a bit too. Fortunately, however, the mall parking lot had been plowed, likely several times throughout this all. All I had to do was wipe the snow off my car. Then I could go home. As I was wiping off the excess ice and snow, though, I saw a figure walking towards me in the falling snow. I wasn't sure who it was because there was almost no visibility. I was just finishing the back window of my car. I walked over and opened up my car door. I felt the warm air of the heater because I had been letting the car warm up in the meantime. I turned around and saw that figure just standing there, staring at me in the snow. I still couldn't make out who it was, just that there was somebody there. Then though, through the falling snow, I heard a familiar voice calling to me. "You know, I really want to see a dead body. I wonder how different you'll look after you died." I didn't respond. I also didn't waste any time. I jumped into my car, slammed the door, skipped the seatbelt, and took off. I did not look back. I didn't care that my car skidded on the snowy road several times. I just got the car back in place and took off because I wanted to get as far away from this person as possible. The next day, I told my boss about what happened. We talked to the manager of the pretzel place, and he told us the guy had quit that very same morning. I guess I wouldn't be seeing him again. I really haven't seen him since then, but I often expect to every time I'm in that parking lot alone. I live in a third-story apartment all by myself. I actually chose this apartment because it had a nice balcony with a sliding glass window that faced the other side of the building. This was cool because the sun never shined in my apartment. I liked it all dark and cozy. I kept my grill out there because once a year I would do a barbecue. The only bad thing about that balcony was that in the winter it would pile up with snow. And of course, this is an apartment. Because I hated mowing grass and I hated shoveling snow, I did not want to shovel all that snow off the balcony. I just kinda left it there until it melted usually. I kept the blinds on the sliding glass door closed throughout the winter. The day this happened, I was coming home from work. We'd had pretty bad snowfall over the past few days. It was snowing particularly hard as I came home that day. I was really tired from staying vigilant all the way home. I just wanted to jump on the couch and sleep forever. As I was sitting down on the couch though, I heard this really odd scratching noise. I'm not even sure how I would describe it to you. I guess it was like a rubbing sound, like if you took your thumb and pressed it up against a window really hard and scratched your nail on it. You know what I mean. I'm not sure how else to explain it. I heard it several times as I was watching television. It was quite annoying, but I did my best to just ignore it. I didn't figure it could possibly be anything important. I kept hearing that noise over and over again throughout the night though. After a while, I decided I was just going to go to bed and forget about it. I fell asleep pretty quickly. I was woken up in the middle of the night because I had to pee really badly. I got up and walked into the bathroom, did the routine. Afterwards, on the way back to my bedroom, I kept hearing that weird noise again. I walked into the living room and I saw something even stranger. There was an orange glow coming from out on the balcony. For the first time, I was really concerned. I snatched up a knife from my kitchen just to be safe. I walked over to the sliding glass doors. I grabbed the cord to open the blinds, pulled them open, and got the shock of my life. Sitting on the balcony, in the snow, were two extremely skinny and extremely pale men, completely naked. They had started a fire in my grill. One of the guys had his foot up against the window and was just rubbing it with his foot, making that noise. I realized they must have been out there all night because I'd been hearing that same noise for hours. I wondered how the guys didn't have frostbite. Upon seeing me, both men jumped up at the same time, revealing much more of their bodies than I ever wanted to see. One of the men began to hiss at me, which of course was just weird. They began to pound on the glass window. I didn't think they would have the strength to break the window, being so skin and bones as they were. But damn if it wasn't an extremely freaky sight. I showed them my knife and grabbed my cell phone, telling them I was calling the police. After slamming on my window for a few more minutes, they gave up. The guys jumped over the side of the balcony and appeared to drop off. It was pretty high up. I mean, it was on the 3rd floor. They must have landed in a snowbank or something. I don't know. The police weren't able to find anything after. I also never saw those two men again. It was so weird and scary. I have no idea how they even got up there in the first place. When I was 18 and moved out of my parents' house, I went to live in the Lakeview area of Chicago. I found a roommate whose apartment was only 1 block north of Wrigley Field. I really wasn't a baseball fan at the time, but it was still a pretty cool place to live. The thing I liked best was that there was always a lot of people around. I always found that sort of thing very cool. Well, I moved there in the winter though, and if you've ever spent a winter in Chicago, you know how rough it can be. It snows a lot, and after it snows, it gets really, really cold. This happened one night when I had to go to the store to grab some food. It was probably about 1 in the morning. I'm one of those backwards sleepers because I prefer being up at night and going to bed during the day. Anyway, it was snowing pretty hard and I didn't have the greatest visibility. I cut through an alley, and when I did, I saw what I assumed to be a homeless guy stumbling about through the alley. In Chicago, you see a lot of homeless people who ask you for money. I'm generally pretty happy to give them some if I have it, but at this time, I had none to spare. When I walked past the guy, he of course asked me for some money. I apologized and told him I didn't have any on me. I kept walking in the snow. When I was about 50 feet away from him though, I looked back, only to see he had a bottle in his hand. He was glaring at me. Ironically, he screamed out, "You deadbeat!" He took the bottle and smashed it on the wall of a building. With the shattered bottle in his hand, the guy started charging in my direction. Terrified, I started to run, but when I looked back, the man was running full speed toward me. He was running extremely fast and coordinated for a drunk guy too. I didn't know what to do because it was a long alleyway with no way to escape. He was catching up to me quickly too. "I'm gonna cut you up, you damn deadbeat," he yelled at me as we went along. I was scared because the man was obviously drunk. That bottle that he had was really messing me up. As I turned to run down another alley, I slipped on some ice and fell on my ass. It hurt, and I screamed out. The guy was going to catch me now. I had no doubt about that. Fortunately, however, I recognized the area I was in. It was the alley behind a gay bar called Roscoe's. Now, I'm not gay, but I'm more than willing to go into a gay bar to escape a lunatic chasing me with a bottle. Forcing myself to get up, I ran over to the bar and tried to get in. The man at the front asked for my ID. I told him I was underage, but I also told him a crazy homeless guy was chasing me with a bottle and asked him to call the cops for me. The homeless guy stopped just short of coming into the bar. The guy I was talking to was huge. I mean, a bodybuilder type. I'm sure you've seen this kind of really big muscular guy before. I guess he also happened to be the bouncer because he went outside and confronted the homeless man. I swear, the guy that was chasing me was scared to death in an instant of this enormous bouncer. Even though he was drunk, he kept his bottle at the ready. As the bouncer moved toward him though, he ran off like the Hulk himself was confronting him. Well, of course I was very appreciative of the man's help. He let me stay in the entryway of the bar while I waited for the police to arrive. I was too scared to go outside by myself, so the cops took me home after. I never saw that particular homeless guy again, but every time I walk by Roscoe's now, I wave to the kind man who may have saved my life that night. He always waves back to me too. What a great guy. This story actually happened to me when I was still living with my parents about 3 years ago. We moved to this new house at the end of 2019, right before lockdown, and multiple things began to happen there. One night around 7 p.m. or so, my mom and I were coming home from school. It was about a 20-minute ride. My mom has this weird habit of always checking who's behind us. That night, she noticed this car had been there for a few minutes already. To be sure we weren't just being paranoid, we slowed down and made 2 rounds in the roundabout. They ended up cutting us off at full speed on the small road going to our house, which wasn't really a busy road at all usually. We assume we must have been at the wrong place at the wrong time and simply aggravated an incident of road rage or something. Fast forward to actual lockdown though. Everything was going pretty well, and we'd all collectively forgotten about that incident earlier. It was in May, so about 2 months after lockdown started. Almost by the end of it really. My sister was downstairs around 3 a.m., just hanging out in the living room. To give some context, my house has a lot of doors and windows in that area. At some point though, she noticed one of the doors slightly opening. She assumed that someone had forgotten to close it and the wind must be blowing it open. When she tried to push it to lock it though, she felt like someone was putting their weight on it to open it up. She screamed as loud as she could and ran upstairs to my parents. They went into the backyard to check if anyone was there, but we didn't see anyone. We just thought it would be a one-time thing, but my mom wasn't so reassured. She started to stay during the night in the living room just to make sure nothing else happened. During the next few weeks, indeed, nothing new happened. She asked me multiple times to stay with her, just to be her witness in case something ever did. Around 1 a.m., we were lying on the couch together. The lights were all off because I had a headache, and my mom was just kinda scrolling through her phone. All of a sudden, we saw a blinding light directed into our living room. It spooked me so much I was completely paralyzed in the moment. My parents went into the backyard to check, but there was still nothing. After that, we saw multiple lights and noises. We checked the surveillance camera, only to see a bunch of weird people at our gate, staring directly into our house. That's not exactly illegal though, so we couldn't do anything about it. This continued for a few months, driving my family insane. In 2021, while we were cleaning the backyard for summer, we suddenly discovered a big hole in the bushes, large enough to allow someone to fit through. We didn't know what to do, but now we had confirmation that someone was coming onto our property at night. Almost immediately after we discovered that hole though, all these incidents stopped happening, and that weird group stopped showing up as well. That made us believe that they knew we were onto them now, but we still don't have a clue about who they were, why they were doing that, or even if they wanted to do something bad to us. I usually get over creepy encounters fairly quickly, but this one was quite different from the rest. I go by the rule, be nice to everyone, because you never know who could be a secret serial killer or something like that. That's worked out pretty well for me the majority of the time. This time though, it was probably what got me into the situation in the first place. When I was 18, I worked as a lifeguard by a small pool. Nothing fancy, basically just a babysitter in the water. When adults got bored of looking after their kids, they sometimes sought me out, for some reason, to have a free therapy session. Mothers and fathers talking about their hardships. I know I worked as a lifeguard, but I can't exactly save that kind of life. One day, a 50-year-old man with his 2 kids came to the pool. As many other people did, he went up to me and started talking. It started with some small talk, like how he didn't let his children eat ketchup because it had the properties to remove rust from metals or something like that. As the hours went by, he started talking badly about one of his kids, how she was overweight, had anger issues, and was worried about boys when no one would ever look at her. I'm not gonna lie, that last statement made me go quiet. I tried to somewhat reason with him to not speak like that about his own daughter. He seemed to listen to what I had to say, so I was happy I could possibly help that kid in some kind of way. Having a parent like that would give anyone a hard time. The next day he came back, extremely happy it seemed, telling me I was so good with kids because my talk had apparently helped him. He then began the day-by-day trash talking of his ex-wife into oblivion. I didn't say much because it felt like it wasn't my place to speak. I didn't want to create unnecessary drama at my workplace either. What set the first red flag in motion though was when the conversation suddenly shifted into him wanting a young wife. It was as if he was trying to trash talk his ex to get me to understand he was single and interested in a relationship with me. The days went by, and he continued to visit every single day. To some extent, I now got the feeling that he came every day just to see me. I was fairly creeped out by this thought. I tried to just ignore it and do my work. As the days passed though, he started asking more and more personal questions. Things like, where do you like to do your grocery shopping? Is there a cafe close by where you live? What are your favorite hobbies in the area? They weren't direct. I was fairly sure he was trying to figure out where I lived without actually insinuating that's what he wanted to know. I kindly deflected all his questions though, by either saying something very obscure or lying altogether. During my last work week there, I had an afternoon shift. I asked my colleague who had the morning shift if anything had happened that day that I should be aware of. He told me they'd had to ban a man from entering the pool area because he'd apparently broken behind the counter at the small pool shop where the workers kept all their personal things. Apparently, he'd been denied by my coworker to get a look at my work calendar, so he tried to sneak in and get a glance in a more illegal manner. That last week, I saw him twice at the end of my shifts, standing near the pool entrance, waiting for me. When I saw him there, I reported him to the pool security guards, and after that, I never saw him again.